Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar about improving the nutritional quality of school breakfast meals. I want to first start out by saying congratulations on being a recipient of a Pennsylvania School Breakfast Expansion Grant. We received a significant number of applications, so the fact that your school was chosen as a recipient should be something that you should take a lot of pride in. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping before I turn it over to my co-project director, Jenny Edmondson. First of all, I'm Elaine McDonald at Project PA with Penn State. Please make sure that your computer volume is turned on. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A box to submit them. You can submit the questions at any time. We'll likely save the questions until the end. The slides from this webinar will be available on the Project PA website within 48 hours. We are recording this webinar, and the recording will also be available linked on the Project PA website. As you know, participation in this webinar is one of the initial requirements of this funding. So to document that you have participated, we're asking if you can please type your name and the name of your school into the chat box to confirm your participation in this webinar. If several of you from one school are participating, just one of you need to do that, and you can do that at any time. If you're joining by phone and you can't access the chat box, then please send an email to Elaine M. at psu.edu stating that you participated. And I will turn it over to Jenny.
All right, thanks, Elaine. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, and let me just join Elaine in saying congratulations on being awarded a school breakfast expansion grant at your schools. Our goal today is that by the end of this webinar, you will have ideas and the resources you need to identify 3 or 4 achievable breakfast menu changes to implement over the grant period to improve the nutritional quality of breakfast at your awarded school. For those of you who are not the menu planner at your school, we strongly encourage you to share the webinar recording and the resources with your menu planner when they become available on the grant website. Working with your SFA's menu planner and with your vendor, for those of you who purchase vended meals, will really be key in improving your breakfast meals and making a big impact on your students' health. Pennsylvania is obviously a diverse state, and you know your menus and your students best when it comes to identifying menu changes that will work. We're going to talk today about why you should focus on improving the nutritional value of school breakfast, provide specific menu changes to focus on, and provide reminders of what is required of you as grant recipients.
Jenny, could I just interrupt you a second? It seems to be that the chat is disabled and they're not able to use that. Some people are using the Q&A to submit their name and school. That's fine. You can continue to use that or send me an email. Again, Elaine M. at psu.edu. So sorry about that, and sorry to interrupt, Jenny.
No problem. So let's start first talking about why making breakfast more nutritious matters to your students and to your school. School meals have a huge impact on and are critical to improving child health. Studies show that many children receive about half of their dietary intake from school breakfast and school lunch meals. And a 5-year study found that children in the US get their healthiest meals of the day at school. Another study found that students who participate in the school breakfast program eat a breakfast of higher nutritional quality than students who eat breakfast elsewhere. So we know that what you are serving at breakfast matters for your students' health. These health benefits extend to better student behavior, better attendance, increased motivation, and improved academic performance. And this, of course, is why superintendents, teachers, and building principals want to make breakfast more accessible and more nutritious because they're seeing the benefits at their schools. More nutritious meals can also benefit your program. A comprehensive national study found that schools serving healthier meals had participation rates that were 10 percentage points higher than schools that served less healthy meals. And higher participation obviously affects your bottom line. Another advantage to improving the nutrition in school breakfast menus now is that school meal nutrition standards are changing. By identifying and then incorporating nutritious menu changes over the course of the grant period, which is now through December 31st, your schools will be better positioned to meet these anticipated nutrition standards. USDA released a proposed rule in February 2023 that includes several proposed changes to the school nutrition program meal patterns, which are meant to ensure that the meal patterns reflect the most recent dietary guidelines for Americans. At breakfast, the proposed changes include reducing added sugars in breakfast cereals, flavored milks, and yogurt, reducing the number of grain-based desserts, and setting an average weekly limit of less than 10% of calories from added sugars. The changes also include gradually reducing sodium at breakfast by 10% each in the fall of 2025 and the fall of 2027, and offering mostly whole grain rich grain items over the course of the week. As recipients of a school breakfast expansion grant, you agreed to use grant funds to implement projects at your schools to make significant and sustainable changes to meet two objectives. The first is to increase participation in the school breakfast program. Although your grant projects vary, most of you will be implementing or expanding an alternative breakfast service method in your awarded schools. Today, however, our focus is on the second grant objective, to improve the nutritional value and appeal of school breakfast meals. We just talked a little bit about why improving the nutritional value of school breakfast is important. So next we want to talk about how schools can do this. And as we walk through this today, try to think about what menu changes you think will work in the menus at your awarded school. Consider ways you can serve fewer items that are high in sugar or sodium, incorporate a greater variety of protein foods to keep students satisfied through the morning, serve whole grains and more fresh produce, including whole fruits and non-starchy vegetables at breakfast. Maybe look at some recipes to get ideas of scratch or speed scratch menu items your students might get excited about. And along the way, consider ways you might be able to add more hot items and reduce prepackaged items to entice more students to eat school breakfast. So let's start with added sugars. Added sugars in our diets include packaged sweeteners we use in standardized recipes or add to our foods like table sugar, syrups, honey, and agave. Added sugars are also the sugars that are added to foods and drinks by manufacturers. The amount of added sugars in a food is usually written in grams. And if you're a visual person, it can be helpful to remember that 4 grams of added sugar on a food label is the same as 1 teaspoon of table sugar. Added sugars do not include the naturally occurring sugars that are found in milk, fruits, and vegetables. For example, the total sugars in chocolate milk will include the naturally occurring milk sugar, lactose, plus the added sugars used to sweeten the milk. So why should we care about added sugars? Well, 75% of American children consume too much added sugar. The dietary guidelines recommend limiting added sugars to less than 10% of calories because eating patterns higher in added sugars are associated with obesity, type 2 diabetes, and other chronic diseases. We've all probably heard the term empty calories, and what that means in terms of added sugars is that you get the calories or energy from the added sugar, but without the vitamins, minerals, protein, fiber, and other nutrients found in whole foods with naturally occurring sugars, foods like unflavored milk, fruits, and vegetables. When growing children and adolescents fill up too much on added sugars, this crowds out the more nutritious foods. An easy way to compare the amount of added sugars in different foods and beverages is to use the nutrition facts label. On this label, we see that 1 cup of breakfast cereal has 8 grams of total sugars per serving. On the line below is where added sugars is listed. And we can see here that all 8 grams of sugar in this cereal come from added sugars. Added sugars has been required on the nutrition facts label since 2020. However, USDA does not currently require data on added sugars to be included in USDA approved nutrient analysis software. On Primero Edge, added sugar is on the menu planning module, But what you might find is that the data is missing for added sugars in many foods, because when those foods were entered in the database, the added sugar wasn't required on the product label. So this is why using the nutrition facts label to compare different products side by side will probably be the easiest way to make decisions about the products that you serve. Currently, school breakfasts provide about 17% of calories from added sugars. And remember, that goal is 10%. Over 92% of schools exceed that recommended limit for added sugars at breakfast. So there's certainly room for improvement here. USDA has proposed a phased approach for reducing added sugars at breakfast. Again, this includes limiting the added sugars in breakfast cereals, flavored milks, and sweetened yogurt, plus limiting the number of grain-based desserts on the weekly menu beginning in the fall of 2025. These changes target many of the most common sources of added sugars in school meals. And then in the fall of 2027, the rule proposes limiting overall added sugars across the weekly menu to less than 10% of calories per meal on average to align with the dietary guidelines. Data from USDA shows that these 10 foods are among the top sources of added sugars at school breakfast. USDA is proposing to start by targeting the added sugars in several of these items, as I mentioned, flavored milk, sweetened ready-to-eat cereals, and sweetened yogurt. Other common sources of added sugars are syrup, frosting, sugar toppings, and similar condiments that are commonly served with breakfast items. A significant source of added sugars that I want to talk about first is grain-based desserts. Grain-based desserts that are currently permitted in the school breakfast program for K-12 students include a number of the items you see here: granola bars and breakfast bars, toaster pastries, sweet crackers, and cinnamon buns. Schools can use USDA's Exhibit A chart to identify foods that are considered grain-based desserts. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, Exhibit A is a USDA tool that menu planners use to determine how a grain item credits in the reimbursable meal based on what group it's in the chart. Grain-based desserts that are permitted at breakfast are marked with the superscript 4 or 5 on the Exhibit A chart. They include a variety of sweet items that are traditionally breakfast foods, such as donuts, coffee cakes, fruit turnovers, granola and breakfast bars, toaster pastry, cinnamon buns, and sweet crackers like animal crackers and graham crackers. This example shows the two items that are in group F on the chart. You can see the cake on top there has superscript 3. Items with superscript 3 are also grain-based desserts, but they are not permitted to be served at breakfast. They are only permitted in limited amounts at lunch or at snack. Coffee cake is marked with superscript 4, which means that it is a grain-based dessert that is permitted to be served in the school breakfast program in the K-12 meal pattern. So USDA's proposed rule would limit the number of grain-based desserts that can be served on the breakfast menu to 2 servings per week. Oftentimes, grain-based desserts are shelf-stable or pre-packaged items, which can make them convenient for school food service. These are also frequently the same items that draw concerns from parents, teachers, and others about the amount of added sugars in school breakfast meals. Toaster pastries made with whole grains are still toaster pastries, complete with added sugars and the optics of being less healthy or junk foods. A best practice to reduce added sugars in your menu is to use product substitution or swaps, where you exchange one menu item with another, usually within the same meal component. Replacing grain-based desserts with items lower in added sugars can make a big difference in the weekly added sugars total. This works because even a small reduction multiplied by many students can make a significant change in your weekly average amounts. Swapping grain-based desserts for lower sugar options can not only reduce the added sugars and improve the nutritional quality of breakfast, it can also benefit your program by fostering a more positive perception of school breakfast at your school. A great place to start is by looking at your current breakfast menu, identifying the grain-based desserts you currently offer, and making a plan to reduce the number you serve by replacing them with a different menu item that is not a grain-based dessert. For some of you, cutting back to 1 or 2 servings per week may be doable. For others who offer more grain-based desserts on the weekly menu, you may want to set a more modest initial goal and make changes over more time. If you have a vendor who provides meals for your school, talk to them about your goals, give them a list of grain-based desserts, and work with them to identify menu items to offer instead of grain-based desserts. This slide shows examples of product substitutions, and it's from the toolkit for the Pennsylvania Governor's School Breakfast Challenge. Hopefully some of you on the webinar today are participating in that. The link to the resource is provided here. I also gave the link for the pumpkin muffin squares since that didn't transfer over in my SNP, but it is, of course, that link does, of course, work on the original resource as well. Another strategy we encourage schools to use to reduce added sugars is to serve lower sugar breakfast cereals. Whoops, sorry about that. Start by checking the breakfast cereals currently offered on your awarded school's breakfast menu. Instead of higher sugar cereals, serve cereals that have no more than 6 grams of added sugars per dry ounce. You'll need to use the information from the nutrition facts label, and you can compare it then to the chart to pick lower sugar options. So this is a label from our earlier example. A 1 cup or 28 gram serving of this cereal has 8 grams of added sugars. When we compare this to the chart, this cereal does not meet the lower sugar standard, which is a maximum of 6 grams of added sugar in a 28 gram serving of cereal. So if this cereal is currently offered at breakfast, the menu planner could look for different cereal options that are lower in added sugars to offer in place of this product. Having trouble with my clicker, sorry. The next strategy is to serve yogurts that are lower in added sugars. Check the yogurts you plan to serve and select products with no more than 12 grams of added sugars per 6 ounces of yogurt. Again, you'll find the serving size of the yogurt measured either in ounces or in grams, and then the grams of added sugars per serving from the nutrition facts label. Then you will use this chart to determine whether the yogurt is a lower sugar option. So when you're looking at the current products you serve, you actually might be happy to find that many of the breakfast cereals and yogurts you already serve meet these lower in added sugar standards, which is great. But by going through and checking your products, you'll also be able to identify any cereals or yogurts that you could swap out for products lower in added sugars. Here are some more ideas. You could consider offering flavored milk less often, or possibly offering only unflavored milks at breakfast. Schools must offer a milk variety at meals. So what that would mean is offering both fat-free and 1% unflavored milk on days when a flavored milk is not offered. I know that for some of your schools, eliminating flavored milk might not be your first choice. Maybe your students absolutely love chocolate milk, and eliminating it as an option would lead to a drop in milk consumption. In that case, you could consider a behavioral economic strategy and place the unflavored milk front and center in the cooler so that it's easier for students to select it instead of having to reach a little farther for the flavored variety. You might be surprised to hear that pancakes, waffles, and French toast are not identified as grain-based desserts by USDA, but certainly the typical condiments served with them can be high in added sugars. Sweet spices like cinnamon and ginger, or a dusting of unsweetened cocoa powder, can add flavor and appeal with less added sugar. You could serve fresh fruit or a special house-made strawberry sauce, or simply offer a lower sugar commercial syrup with these items. Some schools have been successful with savory options, like a waffle sandwich with melted cheese, or a pancake taco with commodity egg or sausage patties and cheese. Muffins and quick breads are also not considered grain-based desserts by USDA. However, when you serve these items, think about ways to reduce added sugars. Check the nutrition facts on commercial items and select those with lower added sugar. Offer muffins and quick breads that get some natural sweetness from fruit or vegetables like apple cinnamon, banana walnut, or blueberry muffins, and banana bread or zucchini breads instead of muffins with chocolate chips that are entirely sweetened by added sugars. So let's look at a couple of examples that show how simple swaps can impact the amount of added sugars at breakfast. The meal on the left includes a toaster pastry, blueberry Greek yogurt, mixed berries, and fat-free chocolate milk. This meal has 47 grams of added sugars and 26% of calories from added sugars. By swapping out the toaster pastry for a lower sugar cereal and selecting an unflavored milk variety, the meal goes from 47 to 8 grams of added sugars and from 26% to only 6% of calories from added sugars. In this example, the meal on the left includes cinnamon rolls, grapes, and fat-free chocolate milk. This meal has 18 grams of added sugars and 13% of calories from added sugars. By swapping out the grain-based dessert for a whole grain-rich bagel with light cream cheese and selecting an unflavored milk variety, the meal drops down to 0 grams of added sugars. So now that we covered added sugars, let's talk next about sodium. Consuming too much sodium can have significant health impacts, negative health impacts, such as stroke and heart disease. And high sodium intake is associated with high blood pressure in children, which I was surprised to learn affects about 1 in 6 kids ages 8 to 17. Based on the dietary guidelines, the average American's daily sodium intake is about 50% higher than recommended. Food and taste preferences develop at an early age, so limiting sodium in childhood, including in school meals, is important for lifelong health. USDA proposes weekly sodium limits that gradually reduce sodium levels to better align with the dietary guidelines for Americans. For school breakfast, this would include 2 10% reductions in weekly sodium in school years 2025-26, and then again in school year 2027-28. 10% reductions were chosen because research indicates that a gradual increase in sodium is less noticeable to consumers. Most sodium comes from salt added during food processing and preparation. And as program operators, you are probably pretty familiar with the menu items that contribute the most sodium at breakfast in your schools. Recently, the US Food and Drug Administration released voluntary reduction goals for food manufacturers in the United States. And USDA is leveraging these recommendations for the food industry with the goal for schools to implement gradual sodium reductions on your menus to allow students' palates to adjust. At the same time, the food industry will be working on developing improved lower sodium products that will make reducing sodium more feasible on your menus. So what are some strategies for reducing sodium in breakfast menus? Just like we talked about with reducing added sugars, you can use product substitution. Adjusting how often high sodium menu items are served and finding lower sodium versions of existing menu items are 2 small changes that can make a big difference in your weekly sodium total. Some sneaky sources of sodium at breakfast that can add up include flavored milk. There it is again. This is because additional sodium is added to flavored milk during processing. Also, some ready-to-eat cereals and potato products like tater tots and hash browns can contribute more sodium than you might think. Identifying these items on your breakfast menu and scanning the market to see if lower sodium versions are available could lead to a successful product substitution. Menu planners can check the nutrition facts label or use Primero Edge or other USDA-approved nutrition software to compare products. Many of you, I know, plan to do student taste testing as part of your grant projects. And taste tests can be a really good tool to introduce new items and help menu planners to learn which items are more likely to be successful based on student feedback. In a lot of schools, breakfast sandwiches are very popular. Commercially available options, especially sandwiches that are on biscuits, can be particularly high in sodium. So for those of you who like to have numbers or who want to have guidelines to give to your food vendors, some suggested sodium guidelines from the FDA are included here for some breakfast sandwiches. To bring weekly average sodium down, menu planners do not have to eliminate these popular items. A good strategy is to offer lower sodium entrees on several days of the week to balance out the days when popular entrees that are higher in sodium are offered. Another idea is to offer more whole grains like oatmeal, granola, grab-and-go grain bowls made with quinoa or steel-cut oats. These are naturally going to be lower in sodium than more processed grain items like bread, bagels, biscuits, and tortillas. You can think about seasoning and flavoring foods with fresh or dried herbs and spices or salt-free seasoning mixes, chopped aromatic vegetables, things like garlic, carrots, celery, onions, bell peppers that smell wonderful when they're sauteed and taste delicious, or using citrus juices. Orange, lemon, or lime juice can give that hit of acid that can really bring out the flavor in food. Also, look for lower sodium cheeses. Swiss, Monterey Jack, cheddar, and mozzarella cheeses are lower in sodium than processed cheeses like American. I'd like to talk a little bit about a sometimes overlooked superhero component in food, which is fiber. I'm betting that all of you have at some point heard concerns about school breakfast quality and nutrition in the media or from parents and others. Some examples I'm thinking of are concerns about refined grains, ultra-processed items, and the amount of juice that's being offered in breakfast menus. Something these foods have in common is that they contain little to no dietary fiber. Fiber is important because it can reduce the risk of heart disease and help with digestive health. Day to day, fiber is important because it helps students to feel full and to maintain a steady rise and fall in blood sugar. It doesn't cause a spike in blood sugar like other carbohydrates can. So some strategies to increase fiber and nutrition in breakfast meals include bumping up the percentage of whole grain rich grains you offer per week. Whole grains include the bran and germ, which are components of the grain that are full of fiber and provide B vitamins and vitamins A, E, and iron. In refined grains, those nutrients and the fiber are stripped away. The meal pattern currently requires schools to offer 80% of grains as whole grain rich items each week. But perhaps your school's menu could offer more, maybe even 100% whole grain rich items at breakfast to help bump up that fiber and offer more nutritious meals. Another strategy is serving more whole fruit or fruit pieces at breakfast instead of juice. I know some of you will be purchasing fresh fruit slicers with your grant funds, and using this kind of tool to offer fresh fruit in a way that's easy to eat is a great way to serve less juice and encourage students to eat more whole fruits, which naturally are going to have fiber in them. Menu planners have the option to serve vegetables at breakfast in place of fruits on the menu. Starchy items like hash browns are popular, but think about incorporating more non-starchy vegetables at breakfast to add color, fiber, variety, and nutrition to your menus. Vegetables work beautifully with savory breakfast options like salsa with breakfast burritos or sauteed onions, peppers, and tomatoes in an egg dish. Based on a breakfast survey that we completed earlier this school year, we heard from some schools in Pennsylvania that a barrier to participation at breakfast is that students get tired of the same items on the breakfast menu. And there are many wonderful recipe resources available to inspire you to incorporate more whole grains and vegetables. And we're going to look at some of those in just a moment. Before we get to that, I want to talk about protein foods at breakfast. Meats and meat alternates can provide B vitamins, iron, zinc, and other nutrients, and importantly, they provide protein. USDA reminds us that children and adolescents who eat a protein-rich breakfast report lower hunger for up to 4 hours. Meats and meat alternates, as you know, are not required at breakfast. However, they may credit toward part of the grains requirement according to the meal pattern. So as long as the menu offers at least 1 ounce equivalent of a grain, menu planners can then offer meat alternates and count them ounce equivalent for ounce equivalent toward the daily and weekly grain requirements at breakfast. USDA has an excellent guide that reviews meat and meat alternates at breakfast, which I linked here. So check that out for more details. Offering meats and meat alternates is another excellent strategy to make menus more nutritious and to offer more variety. A lot of these items are served hot, so serving them is a popular way to boost breakfast appeal for students who love warm or hot items. Some of you already have or will be investing in insulated bags for hot holding with your grant, so you're in a great position to offer more hot items, including meat alternates. There's also a lot of room for including cold or shelf-stable items that work well for alternative service models and for schools that just don't have the capacity to serve a lot of hot items. Yogurt on its own or in a parfait or a yogurt bowl, nut butter sandwiches, cheese sticks, trail mix with nuts, and hard-boiled eggs are some examples. In addition to traditional hot breakfast sandwiches, which can be purchased individually wrapped or made in-house, you could consider other favorites that maybe you hadn't thought about for breakfast, like grilled cheese, chicken sliders, peanut butter and jelly, or cheese quesadillas. You can even think outside the box and consider plant-based options like beans and lentils in breakfast. Yes, you can use roasted chickpeas as an ingredient in granola, or try breakfast lentil quesadillas. I put a link here for USA Pulses. They have some breakfast recipes at this link for schools. I also put a reminder here because recipes you find online sometimes have crediting inaccuracies. So schools always do need to standardize recipes for use in their own school and definitely verify the crediting. School recipes that originate from USDA, from the Institute of Child Nutrition or ICN, and from the Pennsylvania Harvest of the Month, however, have been vetted and verified for crediting. So those you don't have to worry about. So let's look at some recipe ideas. As I mentioned that we did hear from schools that a barrier to increasing participation at breakfast is that students are tired of the same items being served. So adding a featured made from scratch or speed scratch menu item can get students excited about breakfast and bump up your participation. It can also be a source of pride and accomplishment for your staff. There are many delicious and healthy recipes that feature whole grains, vegetables, and proteins that are available to inspire you, and including both hot and cold options. Starting at the top left is baked oatmeal with a surprise, apples and beets, which are a Pennsylvania Harvest of the Month item. And this recipe was actually developed by Palmyra School District right here in Pennsylvania as part of a team nutrition training grant. Next to that is a breakfast burrito with corn, onions, and peppers served with salsa. Get all those good vegetables in there. Homemade granola with dried fruit. Those 3 recipes can all be found on USDA's Child Nutrition Recipe Box, which is housed on the ICN's website. At the bottom left is a crisp apple and peanut butter wrap from Pennsylvania Harvest of the Month. And the next 2 are a mango smoothie bowl and a seasonal fruit and yogurt parfait, again, from USDA's Child Nutrition Recipe Box. The 3 recipes that are stacked on the right side are from the International Fresh Produce Foundation. From the top going down, they include carrot cake overnight oatmeal, broccoli cheddar sheet tray omelet, and breakfast vegetable quesadilla. When we reviewed these at the division, we did find a couple places where there were some crediting errors, but they are entered in Primero Edge, and the crediting for all of those products or all of those recipes is correct in Primero Edge. So look for it in there, and that's where you'll find the correct crediting. The way to find these recipes on Primero Edge is you can tag, or you can type into the tag box PAHOM, and that's going to bring up all of the Pennsylvania Harvest of the Month recipes. or you can type in PAIFPA for the Fresh Produce Association in the tag box, and that will pull up those recipes on the right and some others. There are 10 of them that are breakfast recipes. Some of you plan to offer smoothies as part of expanding your breakfast program, since these are a popular item that can boost participation. So I wanted to just provide some reminders about smoothies and how they credit. And I do want to highlight, again, USDA has an excellent resource about offering smoothies that's on download forums and also linked here. And it has multiple sample offer versus serve menus, tips, and crediting guidance as well for offering smoothies. So milk, yogurt, fruits, and vegetables used in smoothies may credit toward meal pattern requirements. And fruits and vegetables that are used in smoothies are going to credit based on their pureed volume, and they do count as juice toward the weekly juice limit. Some smoothie recipes include ingredients to add taste or texture, things like oats, nuts, seeds, nut and seed butters, and tofu. It is okay, it's totally fine to use these ingredients in your smoothies, but they are not creditable in smoothies. But they would, of course, count toward your weekly, limits on calories, fat, etc. If a smoothie contains herbal supplements or protein powder, none of the ingredients in the smoothie can credit toward the reimbursable meal. So do not add any type of supplements to your smoothies. They cannot be served in school meals. Remember also to use signage and your menus to highlight the meal components in the smoothie, which is required by USDA. As you should all have heard by now, free school breakfast program meals for all students will be continuing in Pennsylvania. In December, this was added or was incorporated into the Pennsylvania School Code. The availability of free breakfast meals obviously removes a huge barrier to participation. The Division of Food and Nutrition continues to encourage all schools to make breakfast more accessible to students through alternative meal service methods and by serving appealing and nutritious meals. And we are certainly excited for your schools to implement your plans through the School Breakfast Expansion Grant to do exactly both of those things. As a reminder, schools that are not CEP schools need to ensure that their point of service systems are set up to accommodate free breakfast for all students while maintaining a record of each student's eligibility status when they receive their meal. In other words, each breakfast meal must be claimed by the student's actual eligibility status, free, reduced, or paid. When the claim is entered, CN pairs will calculate the difference in reimbursement that is paid out of state funds. Schools can utilize a mobile point of service or use manual rosters at kiosks or hallway carts when students receive their meals. Schools must also ensure adequate internal controls are in place so that no second meals can be counted for reimbursement. As grantees, you are required to provide 2 one-week breakfast menu cycles in Primero Edge as part of receiving this grant. And the first 1-week menu cycle should be provided as soon as possible. It needs to be a 5-day breakfast menu cycle that was served this school year, 2023-2024, prior to project initiation, which was February 26th. At your awarded school, and it should represent a typical weekly menu that you served at your awarded school. You'll use a link on the slide to enter the exact name of the menu cycle into an online form, which will assist Elaine and myself in locating the menu on Primero Edge. The second menu cycle will be collected later. This will be for a menu cycle served closer to the end of the grant period after you have implemented some strategies to make your menus more nutritious and appealing at your awarded schools. So this would likely be like late in October or November of this year. I want to stress that these menu cycles are being used only for grant purposes, not for anything else. And we're just using them to compare the awarded schools menu from before they started the grant to after you implemented your projects at your schools. The data that we're specifically looking at on the menus include weekly sodium, weekly sugar. You'll notice it's not added sugars because, as I mentioned, that's not actually in Primero Edge yet or any nutrient analysis software consistently. So we're just using that as a proxy to stand in for added sugars. The number of grain-based desserts, percentage of whole grain rich grains over the week, the number of meat alternates you serve on your menus, the servings of vegetables, particularly non-starchy vegetables, and the percentage of fruits that you offer as juice on the menus. Okay, so this brings us to our poll question, which I think Elaine is going to bring up, hopefully. There it is. So which of these menu changes do you intend to address to make breakfast meals more nutritious at your school? And please select all of that apply. The first is reduce the number of grain-based desserts offered. Remember, these are those items like cinnamon rolls, toaster pastries, granola and cereal bars, sweet crackers, fruit turnovers, donuts, and coffee cakes. Maybe you plan on offering lower sugar cereals, where you'll check the nutrition facts label to select cereals lower in added sugars. Offer lower sugar yogurts. Again, you can check the label to check which of your yogurts are lower in added sugars. Reduce weekly added sugars through other strategies we talked about. For example, serve flavored milk fewer times per week. Offer lower sugar condiments. Serve items sweetened naturally with fruit instead of chocolate, icing, or sugar. Reduce the average weekly sodium. For example, will you look at lower sodium versions of popular items you offer on your menus? Will you try to balance out the average sodium by offering lower sodium entrees several days of the week? Will you replace refined grains with whole grain rich items? Can you bump up to even more than that required 80% of whole grain rich items for the week? Would you like to offer more meat or meat alternates at breakfast to get more protein in your menus? Maybe you think you could add more vegetables at breakfast, especially non-starchy options. And finally, maybe you'd like to reduce the percentage of fruit offered as juice by offering more whole and cut up fruits or vegetables instead of juice. So hopefully you've been able to think of some that we talked about today that you would like to do. So ask you to please go ahead and check off all that apply and enter your vote. Did you bring that up, Elaine? Because I just closed it. So maybe you, oh, there we go. All right. So it looks like a lot of things across the board. Looks like the highest are reducing grain-based desserts, offering more protein foods at breakfast, which is great. Reducing weekly added sugars through some of those other strategies we talked about. But we got a lot of things across the board. So that is fantastic. And you know, like I said, our goal today was to hopefully help you identify at least 3 or 4 that would work at your schools. So thank you for your votes. The last thing I just wanted to mention is that in addition to the slides and a recording of today's webinar, we'll also be posting a quick sheet on the grant website that summarizes the strategies we reviewed today. It includes the added sugar charts. There's the added sugar chart on the quick sheet is expanded. It has a lot more serving sizes on it than the one that was on the slide. And it also has a chart for the yogurts. Schools that purchase meals will want to share this with your vendor, and schools can use this as a resource to begin a conversation between the menu planner at your SFA and the food service staff at your awarded schools. Before we move on to your questions, I'm going to turn this over to Elaine, and she's going to share an exciting opportunity with you and give you a little reminder here as well.
Thanks, Jenny. Yes, the chat box now is working. Sorry about that little glitch. So if you have not already done so through the Q&A or through sending me an email, please type your name and the name of your school into the chat box to confirm your participation. Or again, if you're participating via phone, you can send me an email at elainem@psu.edu. But again, if you've already done it through the Q&A box or by sending me an email, your information is already recorded. Thank you. And then just hot off the presses, many of you may be familiar with the fact that for many summers, we have offered culinary training sessions for school food service personnel. We have plans to offer them again this summer, and you are the first group to whom this is being promoted because it does align with this objective of improving the nutritional quality of school breakfast. So registration just opened today. These sessions are 2-day hands-on sessions. They focus on Pennsylvania Harvest of the Month, but they will include some breakfast recipes. So this would be an opportunity for you or your staff to sample perhaps some new items that you might be interested in serving for breakfast. We do have some travel scholarships available to support attendance, and any school that is represented is eligible to apply for up to $1,000 to conduct taste tests. Next slide. And our sites for this summer are June 26th and 27th at Columbia High School in Columbia, PA. August 6th and 7th, North Hills Middle School in Pittsburgh. August 12th and 13th at North Penn High School in Lansdale. And you can register for the sessions through the Project PA website. And again, this hasn't been announced statewide yet, but it will be announced shortly. So if you or your staff are interested in attending, I would suggest that you hop on that website and register for one of the sessions. And with that, I think we will move on to questions. Jenny, we have a question about what are your suggestions with juice? I personally do not like juice, but know the kids prefer it with breakfast.
Yeah, juice can be definitely a popular item at breakfast, but really just offering, I mean, remember that if you're doing offer versus serve, each half cup serving of fruit that you offer, whether it's whole fruit, fruit pieces, or juice, counts as one item under offer versus serve. So maybe instead of offering, a fruit cup with juice, you could have, a fruit cup and maybe some whole fruit options that you have there, bananas, apples, oranges, or maybe some of you, like I said, purchase some fresh fruit slicers. So you're going to slice up apples and have them bagged up and, in a convenient way for kids to eat them. So there's really and you could also do vegetables too, depending on what your menu has. I mean, a half cup of vegetables would count as a half cup of fruit at breakfast, one breakfast item. So there's a lot of variety and options you could go with instead of juice.
We only have one more question at the moment, but please type your questions into the Q&A box if you have any. This one is, if our breakfast breaks are provided by our local school district, how do I show a menu cycle? Currently, we only do the bagged breakfast breaks.
Okay, so I think you're asking how you would put this cycle into Primero Edge. So basically, if you're doing breakfast breaks right now, that is going to be your menu each day of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So you would enter that in to Primero Edge, your menu for each of those 5 days, and Primero Edge will then put that as a 1 week cycle. And that's the same thing that you would do, for when you're having your administrative review. If you're brand new to this, I know there's at least one school that is a very new sponsor of the school breakfast program that was awarded. If this is all brand new to you, you can reach out to the help desk for Primero Edge. That's CN Resource. It's pahelp@cnresource.com, I believe. But you can send me an email. My email is obviously on the slide, and I will get you for sure the correct phone number and email address, and they can walk you through that. Your school district that you're working with also, that might be a good resource to help you if they're the ones who are providing the meals. They probably are pretty well versed in Primero Edge as well.
I think I can take this next one, Jenny. It's should we be expecting to receive a grant agreement that outlines grant requirements? You won't be receiving an agreement in terms of a document that you need to sign to agree to anything. Your signature was on your grant application, but each primary contact person did receive a document shortly after the award was announced that outlines the grant timeframe, the payment processes, and the grant requirements. So if you are the primary contact person, you should have received it. If not, I would say reach out to that person or contact me and I can send you a copy of that. Okay, do you offer any resources in communicating these new strategies and ideas with food vendors? We are at the mercy of our vendor, which can be frustrating when trying to implement changes.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have any resources specifically for vendors, but um, I did mention that we have a quick sheet, just a 3-page resource that sort of summarizes what I just went over in this webinar. And I think that could really be a good starting point. Where if you can identify a few concrete goals, and talk to them and see, what they can do. I mean, you're not fully at the, you're paying them for the meals, and certainly your input is important, and you have a voice here, and they can, a lot of these things don't cost money per se. If you can look for healthier options, like lower sugar options, lower sodium options. You're buying the food anyway. So if you can find a similar product that will, move the needle, move your menus to a healthier level, that's a way you can go. I recognize you don't have as much control as schools that prepare their meals themselves, but I think that you can definitely have this conversation and show them, some concrete things, and hopefully work together to make some incremental menu changes over time.
Next question is for parfaits/smoothies, would a better option be a plain non-fat Greek yogurt sweetened with honey?
Um, well, not necessarily. I mean, honey is going to be an added sugar. So, I think it depends on what you ultimately put together. I mean, and what your students like. I mean, I know I like plain Greek yogurt, even unsweetened, but I definitely like sweet things on it, like fruit and some granola. So you may find that you can get away with a high protein, lower sugar Greek yogurt, which is a great way to go, to kind of meet both those things of lowering added sugar and bumping up protein at breakfast. But a lot of the things that make it taste good are also creditable, like fresh fruit, and granola. So I think that might be something you'd want to do a taste test on, or look at what you've served in the past and get some ideas of what the kids at your school will probably like better.
Okay, another smoothie related question. Did I see a slide that said any fruit in a smoothie is considered juice? Is that correct? In a smoothie, whole fruit is blended with other ingredients. Is that fruit considered juice when it contains all the fiber, etc., from the whole item?
So that's a great point. And I actually thought about putting that in my talking points about smoothies. So, I mean, some smoothies have juice in them, like just, apple juice or orange juice, which clearly is juice that credits as juice. But USDA does require pureed fruits and vegetables to count toward that juice limit for the week. Basically, any pureed fruit or vegetable that you drink is going to credit as juice in the meal. But you are also correct that the whole fruit or the whole vegetable being pureed in the smoothie is a healthier choice. It's going to have the fiber that is taken out that's not there in apple juice, for example. So yes, it is going to count toward your juice limit for the week. but it is a healthier choice than using regular juice as an ingredient in your smoothie.
I don't see any other questions at this time. And we are coming up on the hour, so I guess we're ready to wrap things up. Thank you all for attending. This was a great session, lots of great questions, and this is one of the items you can check off as having met a grant requirement. So we look forward to working with you on these projects. Again, Jenny has included our contact information on this slide, so you know where to reach us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.